Hey, what's up? Hello, I hope you all are doing well. Welcome back to our channel. As you may know from the last time that we were together here in this liminal internet space, I am behind on my quarterly wrap-ups for the year. And despite the best of intentions, it has been very challenging with all that is going on, both in life and in the world, to make them happen on time. So with all that being said, today I have for you all the books that I read in quarter three, which is July, August, and September of 2024. Let's make a start. The first book of the quarter was The Music Shop by Rachel Joyce. This was a book that we read for the library book club that I facilitate, and generally this book was well received. It follows a man named Frank who is running a music shop that only sells vinyl records in the 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s of this tiny little corner on a back street in kind of a dead-end part of a large but not particularly well-visited city in England. And I would have a guess at like Manchester or Birmingham. And I only say not well-visited because I know those are very populous places. I only say that because it's not quite London. I think a lot of times when we think of a big city in the UK, we immediately, those of us who are not from there, just immediately substitute London in its place. So that's the only reason I frame it that way. And over time, the music shop and all of the other businesses on the street aren't doing particularly well, and they're starting to close one after another. There's some gentrification going on. There's a big developer company who's coming in and wants to kind of buy up all of the little guys. And along the way, there is a woman in a green coat who happens to come along and be really good at tinkering with machines. She fixes things, and she somehow begins to play a role in Frank's life, and he realizes that he is in love with her along the way. That's not a spoiler. It's very, very clear from the outset that that's about what's going to happen. And it follows Frank's journey along with this woman in the green coat as they learn about each other, learn about themselves, and sort of generally make their lives either come together or stay apart. And it's all around the premise of keeping this music shop and the community on the street where the music shop is alive. I found this book to be rather well written. You got a really strong sense of each character. I felt every one of them that played a major role in the story was pretty well developed. The way that their stories were revealed to the reader sometimes left a little to be desired. I wanted sort of either more upfront or more along the way, depending on who they were. But the one issue that I had with this book took place at the very end. There's a big, obviously climactic scene that happens at the end. And I just found it pretty unbelievable that so many people would all know exactly what they needed to know in order to make a big surprise happen. And I understand sort of like the emotional draw of putting a scene like that in there and having it either have the desired effect or not have the desired effect, and the sort of push and pull emotionally of, will the people who organized the thing to be good people get the payoff that they're looking for and help the person they're trying to help? But I think this was a scenario in which the characters asked a lot of the general public. So the ending felt a little unrealistic to me, but overall, I really enjoyed this book. I would recommend it, especially if you have an interest in music and into vinyl and all that scene in the 90s and early 2000s, and that transition from records to tapes to CDs. All of that music industry stuff. This would be a great book for you. The next book I read was The Maiden by Kate Foster. This is a book that a couple of friends and I from grad school decided that we wanted to read together, rather like a book club, and then the next time we all spoke online we would discuss it. And this is a pick that came from a friend of mine who still lives in Edinburgh after our degree program. This story takes place in Corstorphine, which is sort of a small suburby hamlet situation on the outskirts of Edinburgh, if we're talking the greater Edinburgh area up in Scotland. And this follows the story of Christian Nimmo, who is pretty much barely an aristocratic lady. She is a capital L lady in this book, so she's part of the upper class, and Christian is in a situation in the beginning of this book where she is waiting to be executed. So this structure right here, this guillotine situation, is what's called the Maiden, and they use it to murder people for when they have done wrong. Again, very guillotine-like. And so at the beginning of the book, we find Christian sort of waiting to be executed, and throughout 2 different time streams, present of 1679 and before, all the time leading up to that, we find out what happened to her to get her into this situation. I want to say the writing in this book is very, very high level. It feels like a historical literary fiction type of novel. It's very intricate. I felt that the characters in this were very real. It is based on real life events, sort of patching together the existence of this person based on records that exist of her living in that area at the time, what was used to execute people, how people lived back then, the types of scandals that were happening in conflict with the church. All of these records were used by the author to create this story, so it is based on real life events. And I thought that the characters that were either added to make the story more robust, or the characters who were illustrated or brought to life a little bit more than they might have just on a regular old historical document page have been, were really, really nicely done. There's a character who is in direct conflict with Christian. I believe her name is Violet, and we follow her story for a while because she is integral to the main character's plot. I thought the backstory that she was given, the way that the story was left for her to continue on in her life, was very well detailed. The person that you're supposed to hate in this book, you really do start to hate him. And there's a person, I believe, who you're meant to feel ambivalent about, and I really did feel ambivalent about him. I think I felt everything that I could tell the author wanted me to feel, and that to me is a sign of really strong writing. The book ended in the only way it could, but I did also feel that the ending tried to wrap everything up really quickly. You did feel like there wasn't that payoff of having come so many pages so far, and then this was the only explanation, or this was the only way out of that situation. So on the whole, a really great book. Kate Foster has another book coming out, if it's not already out this year, that I'm interested in reading, roughly around the same time period, and I think in the same geographic area. So if this book is available to you, which I had to special order it because it was not available in the United States, I would certainly give it a try. Kate Foster is certainly a voice to watch. I followed that with The Last Resort, a chronicle of paradise, profit, and peril at the beach by Sarah Stodela. And I've mentioned this book in previous videos, specifically the one in my books about travel, because this is a nonfiction book that obviously chronicles the 3 items on the cover, but is essentially the author detailing the trips that she's taken around the world with the intention of sort of unseating the idea of the beach that comes to mind when we talk, at least in the United States, about vacation or on holiday. Whenever people talk about going on vacation, often the emoji that comes to mind is that little palm tree or ocean or something. And somehow in the collective consciousness of the United States zeitgeist, we have this idea in mind that vacation equals the beach, or that a happy place is the beach. Somehow the beach has become a thing, and the author seeks to sort of unseat that and unearth it and unpack what's really going on there when we talk about that place. Not only in terms of different type of beaches, both domestically and internationally, but what does it mean for people, tourists, namely, to descend upon these areas time after time, and how does that impact its ripple effect to the people who live there year-round, for the people whom others are profiting off of their culture, etc., etc. So really digging into those socioeconomic impacts of what it means for the beach to be a tourism staple. I listened to this as an audiobook, and it took me a while. I don't think the audio was particularly well narrated, and the author does trace her journey all across about a 20-year period of her life, both through an intense breakup and through the pandemic, and through getting together with her current partner. There is a lot that is shared about the author's own life and how it impacts her travels, but also I felt that the same piece of information or the same argument continued to come up, which is the beach has been turned into a cultural phenomenon that many people seek or want to seek. And the impact of that is both ecologically, economically, and socially devastating communities that have access to shorelines. While beach tourism has become a mainstay of many area's economic development plans that is quite literally and figuratively being eroded by over consumption, over tourism, too much of too many descending upon too many places, too many cultures being profited off by hotel conglomerates or retail magnates who recognize the thirst that people have for the beach as a destination. So that argument was made multiple times across many, many areas, shown in the unique contexts of each. But by the time I got to the end of the book, I was like, whew, glad we are done with this, because I get it. Beaches are dangerous. Beaches make a lot of people money. The money never goes to the people who actually own the area, or in very limited instances, does it regenerate a community? And is it paradise? I don't know. That depends on your opinion of I guess whether you like the general atmosphere of the beach, but also if beaches are overdeveloped, then it feels like a weird insular experience. If they're underdeveloped, tourists don't have a great time because we have now an expectation in the modern age that everything will be done for us. And it's just an uncomfortable in-between in either situation. Is the beach really worth it? This book left me really unsure. On the tails of that, I picked up a book at our library book sale called The Madwoman Upstairs by Catherine Lowell, and this was my first 5-star book of the year. This is a novel that follows the journey of this young woman who goes off to study at Oxford for her undergraduate degree in English literature. She is the last remaining descendant of the Bronte sisters. So this young woman is studying English at Oxford. She has a tutor who is a scholar in English literature and the Brontes, but refuses to discuss them with her as part of her degree. And it essentially traces this woman's journey through the death of her father, and uncovering her past and her deep connection to the sisters, writing her degree paperwork and thesis and papers and all of these studies that she's undertaking. And this book is so intricately plotted. It is the slowest burn possible in terms of both plot and interpersonal character relationships. And everyone in this book is characterized just enough so that you understand who they are without going too deep. And it is littered with perhaps the most irritating academic language about English literature that there is. So if you don't like reading deep opinions on very high level academic kind of snotty takes on different pieces of literature or essays or the like, then don't read this book. But if you can stand to basically listen to a 40-minute lecture condensed into 3 paragraphs about pieces of writing and writers that you have never heard before or heard of before, then this is a great book for you. But if that's not your jam, I would skip this one. For me, it worked because I love a research article. I'm happy to read them as often as I can. And so that language did work for me. But I did feel it started to weigh on me, and the book became a slog about halfway, 3/4 of the way through, where I was like, all right, guys, we get it. You have deep opinions on this text, like, but let's get back to the plot. And I had to kind of check myself and recognize that them having these opinions, all of the characters in the tutorials, that's part of the plot. Them having these deep conversations is what leads the characters into the next step in the plot line. I loved this book. I thought it was just sort of meandering enough to not feel like a formulaic plot line, but also give you that end of book, last 150 pages payoff that you're expecting for having made it through the first 2/3 of the book. It's got an eccentric father who puts together a lot of puzzles and spends a lot of time not telling anybody what he's talking about and being cryptic. It's got a rival in the academic sphere. It's got all of those sort of archetype characters you'd expect from academia. And I wish I could show you my copy of the book too, but I've already lent it out because it is that good. Unfortunately, I then sank back into the sphere of picking out books to read that had been recommended to me by my Kindle, which we established in my Q2 wrap-up was probably not the best choice. However, the next book that I read was called Earl's Trip by Jenny Holiday. And this is essentially a take on the term girls' trip, but instead it's 3 earls in the Regency era who always take the same sort of summer getaway for 2 weeks or a month or something every year, and they go off together just to be in the country air. And so it's essentially a boys' trip, but they're all earls, so hence the play on words. In this book, we pretty much center around one of the earls and a woman that has to come with him who he's known since childhood, and you can tell from the very beginning that the two of them are meant to get together because this is essentially a historical romance, and it is given the treatment of a contemporary romance novel set, however, back in the Regency era. This book, I feel like I can't say very much about. It was very open and shut. You get all 3 earls this time, all 3 of these men having sort of that camaraderie and love and respect for each other that you would ordinarily see in a book like this among female characters, except in this situation, they are, of course, men. There's a devastation and a scandal that the main female character and her sister are trying to escape from, or at least kind of pushed down in society, so they go on this trip to lay low for a while. And there is also a plot line of an older person in this book who's really struggling with memory loss, and it deeply affects one of the characters, which I thought was a very interesting thing to weave in because it is not often so broadly called out in historical romance novels. And I thought it was a really nice piece to include because it is something that must have happened and it is generally not paid attention to. So I liked the way that that was handled with kindness and thoughtfulness and wasn't just skated over. On the whole, though, I found this book a little bit of a letdown. This book is the beginning of a series and I don't think I would continue on with it. I can see the other 3 characters, all of which sort of has an archetype that is going to, you know, find eventually the woman that suits them and will continue to suit them as they take on more responsibilities in their earldoms. I can very much see where it's going. I don't think the writing was strong enough or interesting enough for me to continue with the series, but it was cute. It was a short little diversion, and I, again, really did like that piece about how memory loss was being handled not only with the character experiencing it, but also the characters around them. Then I turned to another trip, Kilt Trip, by Alexandra Kelly. This is a contemporary romance about a woman who shows up on the scene in Scotland, and she is some kind of tourism manager who's working for a startup, and she has to prove herself, and her goal is to take this Scottish tourism company and turn it around because they're losing money, and her firm has been hired by their owner, and it's a family business, and lo and behold, does she wind up falling in love with the kid who is due to take, I shouldn't call him a kid, with a man who is due to take over the family business? Yes, she does. This is the trope of the two of enemies to lovers. They hate each other at the outset and eventually find their way to each other. This book, though, was just not well done. There was a lot of it that is unbelievable, and there were also a lot of points in it where I felt we just didn't have enough sentences to get us from action to action. Oftentimes I have to reread in books of this genre paragraphs to make sure that people really did either sit down and then stand up or walk across the room, because an action will be indicated and then a reaction will be indicated, and there will be a forgotten piece in the middle of when that character moved to get to the reaction that they are now giving to a new character, if that makes any sense. So you can't say somebody stood up in response to something someone said if you haven't already written that that character sat down. And this book suffered from that. The more times I have to reread because it's not clear an action was taken, the more it frustrates me. So I don't know that I would continue with this. I think it was very much too close to a place that I knew, and I was looking for all of the particulars that would indicate inaccuracy, and I found enough of them. I also just didn't care for the main character, I don't think. She suffered from a very strong lack of self-awareness or willingness to engage in any practice that would certainly help her to become a better person. On the whole, I think romance novels, particularly those set in modern day contemporary life, could really do well to include some mental health therapy for a lot of the characters. And when it's not indicated that anyone is keen on accessing those services, even though it's clear from their socioeconomic status that they very well could, it does not make for a great plot. The fact that you're not willing to try to figure out how to become a better person and are leaning on another romantic interest character for that intense emotional support to make your life better, maybe it works for some people. It does not really work for me. Shortly after that, The Good, the Bad, and the Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto came off of my list. This is the last in the Dial A for Aunties trilogy, and this actually was the book that allowed me to complete my Goodreads challenge for the year. So I read all of the books that I intended to read. I'll reflect on them a little later at the end of this year, but this book ended both that challenge and this series for me. I loved Dial A for Aunties. Bex gave it to me, I think, for Christmas or for my birthday one year, and it has been a delightful thing to see continue. I love the characterization of the aunties. I love the author's note at the beginning of each book that shares that this is certainly something, a piece of writing that is coming from the author's own experience being Indo-Chinese, and she is portraying characters in the way that people in her own life exist, and she's not mocking them, but she is presenting them exactly as they are. And I love the boldness of coming out and saying that. I love the boldness of absolutely writing the book in the way that is perfectly in line with real life. I just found the plot of this book wholly unbelievable. There were capers and heists and kidnappings and like recovering people, and all along there's a big secret being kept by the main character. And over the course of these three books, like the premise has had to grow higher and higher stakes every time, and the stakes got so high in this book they were unbelievable. I also didn't find it quite as funny as the first two books, and I think that was definitely dampened by the main character keeping a huge secret from her entire family the whole time. I was glad to see this series come to a conclusion. It was cute. It made for a nice wrapping up of everything, but I do think the series has reached the end of its course. But speaking of threes, the next book I read was called 123 by Lori Frankel. This was also another 5-star book that I read this year. I read this for my library book club, and even though the conversation raised some points for me in that meeting that led me to have slightly more negative opinions of this book, I maintain my 5-star rating of it because I just enjoyed it so much. This story follows three sisters who are triplets, and they each have their own special characterization and qualities to them. The youngest sister, 3, is the smartest. They all call each other by numbers, and everybody knows it. She has an incredible mind. The second sister, 2, is the town's librarian, even at age 16, and she has a really sharp analytical mind for organization. She only ever wears yellow. She has to have things in a certain order. Frankly, this character, it's not outrightly said, but this character is very autism coded. And then 1 has the stereotype of the eldest sister. Right? All of the things that come in that category. These girls, I don't want to say become embroiled in a mystery because it's not a mystery novel. It's very much more of a family drama. But over the course of the book, there's not only a coming together of the family and sort of those very happy, dramatic feelings of all three of them working out their differences, but there is also the underlying mystery of what is about to happen. Lori Frankel's writing is incredible. She writes in 3 different voices in this book for 1, 2, and 3. They alternate chapters 1, 2, 3 throughout the entire book, which actually opens on 1 and ends on 3, which is a really nice touch. I was so impressed with all aspects of this book. And if you want to know more, you can check out my Goodreads review of it as well, where I write a little bit about it, but just such impressive writing from this author. I've heard wonderful things about Lori Frankel. This wasn't the book I wanted to pull off the shelf for book club. I was actually looking for a different book by her, but this is the one that was there, and I'm really glad that I picked it up. It was an excellent novel, and I would recommend it to anybody. It was around that time that I saw that the 13th novel in the Flavia de Luce series by Alan Bradley was about to come off of my holds list. It's not the 13th, it's the 11th. What am I saying? The 11th novel. There was no expectation that there would be an 11th novel. The series was set to end at 10 books, and the 11th novel was a surprise. So I decided, let's prepare. Let's go back to the beginning and start again with The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie, a book that I have loved since it came out, since I brought it home. The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie continues not to disappoint, following Flavia de Luce across her many misadventures in the small village of Bishop's Lacey in 1950. She is an 11-year-old girl with a bicycle, a passion for poisons, and access to a pretty much abandoned chemistry lab left to her in her father's country manor estate by her eccentric uncle Tarquin de Luce from back in the 30s and 40s, and she grows up in this crumbling old estate. Her poor mother has died in a mountaineering accident. She lives at home with her father and her 2 older sisters who are nasty to her, and she is nasty back to them. She is a precocious child who thinks very highly of herself. She thinks she is very, very smart. I noticed for the first time in rereading this book that she definitely suffers from the same judgments of class distinction that would have been common in the 1950s that adults would, and that kind of irritated me. But looking back on a more nuanced reading of her character, it makes sense that she would have inherited those judgmental conceptions of stereotype between herself as a more aristocratic daughter of a army colonel, regular villagers in the working class. This first book follows her discovering a body out in the vegetable patch out back in the garden, and the subsequent connections that it might have to her father and her family's past. And the second book, which I also read immediately following that, The Weed That Strings the Hangman's Bag, follow yet another murder in Bishop's Lacey, this time of a famous puppeteer who is prominent on the BBC for his television program. And this really starts the series off with, all right, here we go. This could have been a standalone book with one murder that happens in this tiny town, but now the author has to figure out how many different ways can a murder happen in this tiny little village of Bishop's Lacey before it starts to feel like, maybe the police need to take a deeper involvement in the goings-on of the town and the people who live there, because there's quite a lot of murders happening. Actually, it's the same premise as Only Murders in the Building, and it's the same problem I kind of have with that TV show of, okay, there are only so many murders we can have in this one place before somebody needs to get involved and figure out what's going on. Why are so many people being killed here? It's unrealistic. So these 2 books set it off and running. This is the first time I'd listened to the audio. I love the person who is narrating these. I think she really embodies Flavia. She's giving all of Flavia's little literary and radio references that are apt for the 1950s. They're apt for the time. Feeling and verb and a voice behind them that I don't think that you get from the written page, especially if you're somebody who was not living in that time period. I was not around in 1950 and 1951, so I don't have a strong command of those references. I don't have a strong command of what it would sound like on the wireless when a radio program was being broadcast, so it's nice to hear all of that brought to life. The last 2 books of the quarter that I read were Anita de Monte Laughs Last by Xochitl Gonzalez. Again, this was a library book club pick. It follows Anita de Monte, who is an artist in the 1980s into the 90s, and her husband, Jack Martin, who is also an artist, but in a very different style. They have a fraught relationship. This book gets spooky. This book involves both physical and emotional abuse, and also, I think, a really clear feeling of resolution for those 2 things by the end. We work in 2 different time streams, both a contemporary timeline and a prior timeline in the 80s. We trace both artists' careers, how they came to intersect with each other, how the 2 of them came to be involved in each other's lives, the types of their art. I listened to this book, which is performed brilliantly, I believe with an actor who starred on Orange is the New Black. And honestly, everyone in book club really enjoyed this book. They really enjoyed the way that the story unfolded. They enjoyed the characterizations. I think the payoff at the end for the little feeling of mystery and spookiness that happened all the way through was exceptional. The timeline of a contemporary character who was not at all related to these characters for a lot of the book was also really nicely done, but I did want to strangle that person for most of the book for just being really stupid and making bad choices, even though I understood the motivations behind all of those choices. This book was really emotional, really evocative. It was a great read. However, it was brought to our attention by a member of the book club that this book is based on two real life artists, and the author did not make any attempt to contact those folks until the book was already published. So there's an interesting intersection between the theft of someone's real life story and using it for a work of fiction and fictionalizing an account of two people without giving any credit to the family or the estate of those two people for whom the lives are being portrayed. So I think the writing is wonderful. The story is excellent. There are some ethical questions surrounding how it came to be, though. So if you know any more about that, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And lastly, I read a book once again recommended to me by my Kindle. I think because it is somehow popular on the TikTok, Book Talk, whatever that's called. And that's The Game Changer by Lana Ferguson. I understand all the drama that's happening with hockey themed contemporary romances now. So I said, okay, let's see what all the fuss is about. And when I tell you I came away from this knowing deep in my soul that I was right in giving this book 2 stars, I will never go back on that rating. I can understand the need to escape into a book that is vaguely about something that not a lot of people, comparatively to something like baseball or American football in the United States, know a lot about, which is the NHL. However, I had to come to this from an interesting perspective. And this is where I would also invite you to read my full thoughts on my Goodreads review, because it is it is scathing. I live with a person who knows a lot about the NHL, who lives, breathes statistics and hockey journalism, and every day I learn something about the National Hockey League that I didn't know before. So my brain is full with a lot of context, years worth of context, perhaps 30 years of context about the National Hockey League, which is why I was able to come to this book and say, that's not correct. That would never happen. That's unrealistic. What the hell is going on? So, unfortunately for me, whatever the plot of this book was clouded by my keen understanding of reality around hockey, specifically in the state of Massachusetts. And I found most of the plot to be based on something that was so incorrect that I could barely enjoy trying to suspend my disbelief that it would really happen. Hence, my friends, the 2 stars. And lo and behold, that is how I finished out Q3. If you have read any of these books and would like to offer your feedback on them in the comments, I would be delighted to read it. As always, we thank you so much for watching. Anything that you want to know about us is probably in the description. I hope you're having lovely weeks and lovely lives, and we will see you very soon.